the attendees coming in. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining today. We're going to give it a few minutes to let attendees join this meeting, and then we will begin. So let's give it just about 2 minutes, and then we'll get started. Thank you for joining today's discussion. You can see people coming in as attendees. I'm Mary Ann Petrillo. I'm with West Center. I'll be helping on the back end to facilitate this call. Should you have any questions during the meeting, please feel free to put them in the Q&A or in the chat. And we'll be beginning shortly as more people join the call. So you're joining the Zoom webinar for the Mendocino Community Services District on water feasibility study. Let me check. Oh, we've got a good turnout. Looks like there's about 20 folks, 13 people attending. We'll give it a little bit more time. And then I'm going to turn it over to you, Jim, in a minute. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. And we will come back to the slides in a little bit, but let me turn it over to the MCCSD board. Jim?
Okay. Well, thank you everyone for attending today. This is a special meeting, and I'd like to call to order the Mendocino City Community Services District Board of Directors special meeting on August 27, 2024. And Katie, could you call the roll?
Sure. Donna? Here. Jim?
Yes.
Ishvi?
Here. Okay. Well, today we have a special presentation and workshop that is being conducted by GHD regarding the Community Water System Feasibility Study. And Mary Ann Petrillo with West Company will be opening the discussion. And Mary Ann, please take it away. Mary Ann, are you muted? We can't hear you.
How about now? That's better.
Yeah, we got you.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks, board, for joining and for conducting this special meeting. I just want to remind everybody that if you have questions during the presentation, feel free to put them into the chat or into the QA. We're going to be monitoring those. We'd like to ask you to hold your questions until the end of the presentation. And also keep in mind that when it does come time for Q&A and discussion, to hold your comments to 3 minutes, just to allow everybody enough time to voice their questions and thoughts about this presentation. So I want to introduce today's presenters. They are going to be Adam Rausch. These are all GHD team members, Holly Ziegler and Ryan Crawford. And I'm now going to turn it over to kick us off to Matt Foster, who's the district staff engineer for the SAFER project. So Matt, I'm going to stop my slide sharing and turn it over to you now. And just as a reminder for folks who might not be familiar with Zoom, if you only want to see the speaker, there is a way in your upper right corner to change it from speaker viewing to gallery viewing. So just keep that in mind. You have the controls for those of you who are watching this webinar. Thanks. Matt, it's all yours.
All right, thank you. Hi, everyone, and good afternoon. My name is Matt Foster. I work for the local Division of Drinking Water office, field office. That's the Mendocino district, and we're located in Santa Rosa. So I'm going to be talking a bit about a parallel effort that we're working on not directly connected to what GHD is working on, but it may become related down the road. So who is DDW? The Division of Drinking Water is part of the State Water Resources Control Board, which is the state agency responsible for regulating public drinking water systems in California. A public water system is defined as serving water for human consumption to 15 or more service connections, or an average of at least 25 people per day, for at least 60 days per year. For many decades, we've regulated public water systems throughout Mendocino County, but some public water systems have gone under our radar and without a domestic water supply permit. We've known that the town of Mendocino has several of these unpermitted public water systems. And we've generally required a system to obtain a permit one at a time as we discover them. But this time is a little different. In 2022, DDW decided to try to identify all of the unpermitted water systems in the town of Mendocino. We sent out a set of surveys to local property owners, and we found 10 unpermitted public water systems. So we then requested permit applications from these 10 systems, and we performed physical inspections of the systems late in 2023. So to obtain a domestic water supply permit, a water system must demonstrate to DDW that it is complying with all regulations relevant to public water systems. These include both water quality and reliability standards. We have not yet received complete permit applications from 7 of these 10 systems, and 3 of these systems also have significant deficiencies to overcome before they can qualify for a permit. So we are in the process of issuing citations and compliance orders to these 7 systems to require a complete permit application and to correct the deficiencies that were identified last year. For those 3 with major deficiencies, such as a well that goes dry during drought conditions, we are also asking that these 3 systems create either a consolidation plan or to complete a restructuring assessment and compliance action plan. And I want to clarify that these actions are not directly related to Mendocino City CSD's current SAFER project, but this project can benefit these unpermitted systems by potentially providing a community water system to connect to in the future. This would allow currently unpermitted systems and permitted systems potentially getting away from having to deal with state regulations and hand that responsibility over to MCCSD. So any questions regarding the permitting or enforcement should be directed to us at DDW, not to MCCSD. So thank you for the few minutes to discuss that. And with that, I will now turn it over to Holly with GHD.
Can everyone see the welcome? All right. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the first of 2 focus community meetings regarding this project that we're working on. The project is for Mendocino's community water system feasibility study. My name is Holly Ziegler. I'm the project manager for this project. I work for GHD. I'm a licensed civil engineer with almost 2 decades of experience in the water industry. And up until recently, I was a Mendocino County native. I'm currently living out of state, but plan to come back. Oh, sorry. All right, let's go to the next slide. So the agenda of our presentation today is really to give everybody a background introduction to the project team, who we are, why we're here, the scope of our work. To describe items 3 and 4 on the agenda are the 2 components of the project that we're working on. Item 5 on the agenda is to describe the funding for this project, which is funded by the SAFER program. And then we'll describe our schedule. And at the end, the most important part of this workshop is to listen to everybody, gather your feedback, and, hear your questions. So let's jump into it. Project background. Oh, why these aren't. All right. So if you live in Mendocino and you're on this call, you're likely aware of the water scarcity issues, plaguing the coast, especially Mendocino. The drought in 2020 and 2021 was one of the worst drought periods in Mendocino's history. The situation became a crisis when water haulers stopped delivering water because neighboring water systems could no longer sell water to water haulers. As a result of the recent drought and really just the history of droughts in Mendocino and Mendocino City Community Services District authority over groundwater management and their moral obligation to oversee it, they requested technical assistance to find solutions for this problem. So they submitted a formal technical assistance request, I think that was in 2023, to the state to ask for help because the community frequently runs out of water. We got together as a team. The team, GHD was identified as a technical assistance provider. And we had our first meeting where we developed the plan of attack for how we could come up with solutions for the community. So the goals of our project that we came up with were to develop a feasibility study. And in that feasibility study, there's two components to it. The first is actually to develop a source water study, and the second is the feasibility study itself. The goals of our project are to identify and describe existing water systems in the study area, identify water sources, develop alternative solutions, which will include some sort of community water system concept designs, and recommend an alternative out of this process. In a second phase, if the state funds it, and if you seek for a second phase, we would submit, not we, but the technical assistance provider at that time would then submit a DWSRF construction financing application to actually build a project potentially. But overall, the goal up in the top right corner of this slide is really to provide the community of Mendocino with a clean and reliable water supply, which you haven't had ever. The GHD project team is myself, Holly Ziegler. I'm the project manager. Adam Roush, who's also on the panel with us today, is the program manager for this program of technical assistance projects that we're working on. Ryan Crawford is our geologist. And you all met Marianne Petrillo earlier. She's a sub to us. She owns West Business Development Center and is handling all the community outreach and engagement portions of our work. As I said earlier, there's two components to the project. Those two components are the source water study and the alternatives analysis engineering report. But let's start with the source water study. Essentially, the source water study is the first report that we're working on. And in this report, our goals are to estimate the study area demands. So how much water do we need? How much water do we use as a community? And number two, identify the source water options. So we're really answering the question, how much water do we need and how much do we have? Oops. The second component, which is really what the project name is, the title of the project, is to prepare an alternative analysis engineering report. In this report, we'll use the source water study to identify and develop alternative water system concept designs. So we're going to come up with 3 different potential solutions for the problem. The problem being water scarcity. And the question that we're really answering in the second component is, how do we best use it? How do we best use the water that we identify in the first component? So what is the study area? we had to limit ourselves in the area that we were considering in these studies, obviously. So we chose to limit the study area to the area served by MCCSD currently. That's in the orange line. If you can see it, hopefully you can. And plus 1 mile. So the study area is MCCSD service area plus 1 mile. Minus the ocean. We're not looking there. And this study area really encompasses what we all know as the village of Mendocino or the town of Mendocino. It encompasses that whole area, you know, plus even across Big River and north of the town, including Surfwood. So one of the very first things that we had to do when we started this project out was identify all the water systems. As Matt Foster said earlier, we had to identify all the public water systems within the study area so we can get a good handle on what their sources are, what their source capacities are, and how much water they're using. We're also obligated to do a conditions assessment of all the public water systems in our alternatives analysis. So just briefly describing, you know, what the system is, who it serves, what are the conditions of the infrastructure in that system. So this slide shows the list of the 28 water systems that we identified in the study area. And if you're on the call and you're one of these water systems, hopefully you see yourself. The picture that we have here is a snapshot overlaid of the area. All the purple and orange splotches are where these water systems are located. So these areas will add up to 28. There's a lot of water systems in this study area. There's a lot of separate water systems just in the district's service area, as you all know. So now I'm going to turn it over to Adam Rausch. He's going to talk, or sorry, Ryan Crawford. Sorry, Adam. Just so he can briefly describe the source water study because he's leading that.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, so there's a lot to unpack here, but I think we're going to keep it sort of to the main points really. And I'm going to do just a teeny little step back, you know, and really source water studies of the area is nothing new. There have been numerous studies dating back really formally into the early 80s by the Division of Drinking Water. Did an initial one sort of on the coastal systems. And then they did a more focused one in the mid 80s for the town. And then 1990, another one really working with the district and really identifying really just all sources of water and potentially how much there was at that time, and which is really helpful for us. This is one of our tasks really is not reinventing the wheel. What have people really smart people in the past already identify as problems and solutions and alternatives? And then there's several after that into the 90s, and then the district themselves have done their own drought scenarios and water shortage contingency plans and updates to that, and other studies recently as well that have been done with groundwater. So, you know, really what we're tasked with is really just summarizing really all the water supply assets and capacities really within the study area, which Holly showed us a minute ago. You know, and part of that is looking at all the available, you know, groundwater well logs from the drillers and well completion reports. Those are somewhat helpful in some ways, and in other ways not. Really kind of estimate really all the, you know, the study demands, you know, really in acre feet. I think, and the reason I think that, you know, why we want to go into acre feet is because once you get into millions of gallons, it's hard to even visualize or imagine what that even is. So an acre foot, really, you know, 1 acre square, a foot deep in water. So if it's thousands of acre feet, it's like a tower of water, an acre, you know, in surface area, thousands of feet high, which that's not what we're looking at here. But and then really identify all source water options. It's really what we're sort of required to do. And so, you know, that includes groundwater, really what's going to be from shallow wells, you know, medium wells and deeper wells. Surface water, you know, there's lots of, you know, lots of surface water in the area, but it's a matter of, how do you capture and store it, and who's already doing that, and what's working, and what's been recommended in the past, and really seeing what's there. And then of course desalinization, ocean and brackish water. Brackish being, quite a bit inland. You can also get sources of water deep in alluvium, sort of somewhat disconnected but connected to the surface, but much easier to treat, and much cheaper to treat. And then of course conjunctive water uses, really recycled water. What are the types of uses and ways we can sort of offset potable water uses and use recycled water? Can we capture stormwater and use that in ways that could also reduce sort of the potable water demand? And then are there opportunities to really recharge the various aquifers? And we can go into the weeds on that if we want later, but right now I'll keep it to that. There's several types of aquifers, I'm sure, the community knows that best, really, but I will keep going here. I think that's the last slide for me. And there's plenty to talk about within this slide, but we'll keep going. And I think this is where we pass it to Adam.
It's going to come back to me now.
Okay, thanks, Holly.
Thank you, Ryan.
Sure.
So once the source water study is drafted, we can really dig in on the alternatives analysis engineering report, and that's what I'm going to talk about here briefly. We are tasked with coming up with essentially 3 different concept level solutions, concept level community water system designs. Before we can even do that, we need to gather information. We need to review the previous studies. As Ryan mentioned, there's quite a few. We have all of the ones that we're aware of. We reviewed all of them and used the conclusions that they got from those studies to really inform this study in 2024. We visited each community water system. There's 4 community water systems within the study area, and those are different than the other 24 water systems. There's 28 public water systems, but 4 of them are community water systems. The definition, I think, for a community water system is that they serve permanent, full-time residents, people that are using the water consistently. And it's 15 connections or 25 people. Someone, if one of the other panelists, if I'm wrong, correct me. But essentially they're larger and they're serving people that are not transient. The 4 community water systems in the study area are Surfwood, Point of View, Hills Ranch, and Big River Vista. So we visited actually all but Big River Vista and met with the operators and the board members, looked at their system so we can write up a description of each of those in our study. And once the source water study is at a draft point where we have sources well-defined, demands calculated, we can really start looking at what we can do with that water and who we can serve. We also, at the end of the alternatives analysis, will be developing some rough construction cost estimates at a level 5. So these are not cost estimates that you would see if you put something out to bid, but they gave us an idea so that we can compare apples to apples, what we're looking at. The elements that would vary between the alternatives that we ultimately come up with are the sources of water, whether or not we're combining sources, we're using a combination of groundwater, desalination, stormwater capture, conjunctive use. So sources are going to vary between the alternatives that we develop. Consolidation. We need to understand the interest of existing water systems as it relates to consolidation, so that we can create these 3 different community water systems with that in mind. There might be systems that don't want to, that do, in different locations. The service area itself, based on how much water we have, who can we serve? It's going to vary based on that. And lastly, the infrastructure. So each alternative will vary in terms of infrastructure. And when I talk about infrastructure, I'm talking about water mains, fire hydrants, treatment plants, treatment systems, tanks, service connections in terms of who we're serving, and or pump stations. And there's all sorts of other appurtenances that I don't have listed here that goes into, the installation of an actual community water system. But these are the big ones. So the schedule for our project is over here on the right on this slide. We're here today in the red. We're at the first focus meeting. We didn't have these 2 focus meetings originally in our contract, and we decided internally between all the stakeholders that are on the group meetings every month, we really need to have these focus meetings and hear from folks in the community and get anyone's brainstorming ideas out front. So this is the first of 2 focus meetings, and then we will deliver the draft source water study at the end of September, and the public will get a chance to review that. Then we will host our first community meeting, which will be in person in October of 2024. Then we will roll out the draft engineering report in November and have a second community meeting after the draft engineering report is rolled out. What I don't have showing on here, there's actually a couple more things. The final of these 2 components are due in January and March. So we hope to have this entire project completed by March of 2025. And now I'm going to turn it over to Adam Rausch so he can briefly describe what the SAFER program is.
Thanks, Holly. Yeah, my name's Adam Rausch. I'm out in West Sonoma County, so I'm a little bit south of you guys. In my role as program manager for our SAFER and technical assistance work, I've been lucky enough to work on these projects with about 40 communities throughout California. And the first of those projects are going into construction now, so it's really exciting to see those impacts happening. Obviously hoping we can do something positive in Mendocino as well. But I'm here to sort of, give an introduction broadly about what is the SAFER program, what is the technical assistance program. SAFER stands for the Safe and Affordable Funding for Equity and Resilience. It was established generally to bring environmental justice to California, but specifically to assist in providing safe drinking water to every Californian. The State Water Resources Control Board basically allocates funding from California Senate Bill 200 and some other external sources for construction projects. These are allocated through an application process. That's all the blue stuff on this slide. I will mention that application is thorough. It's quite involved. The state wants shovel-ready projects, so they want plans and specs and financials all included in the application. But to their credit, they also understand that can be hard for small systems or communities where there isn't a large water provider already in place. So within SAFER, they have the technical assistance or TA program. And that's designed to help small disadvantaged communities through the application process. Small for them means less than 10,000 people, so Mendocino absolutely classifies. Disadvantaged is median household income of less than 80% of the statewide average. It's probably less clear or less obvious, but there's, as you'll see, there's funding either way. To their credit, they made the path into the TA program very simple. So it's a one-page form that basically says, here's who we are, and here's the problem we're facing. And so that's, MCC filled that out. As Holly mentioned, GHD has been assigned the technical assistance provider role. And the technical assistance providers receive money from the state to provide assistance and can contract with specialists. So West Center, for example. Broadly, the TA provider has 3 jobs, and I think this is going to dovetail with some of the stuff that Holly said. First, we study the problem. Because we only have a single page sheet, we always start by trying to learn. Once we have a handle on the situation, then we can go into recommending solutions. So that's really this source water study and the alternatives assessment wrapped up there. The third step because we only provide recommendations. The third step is after the stakeholders decide on a solution, then we can help prepare the application materials in support of that solution they've selected. So that would really be an additional phase if you guys come to, sort of the community comes to a consensus about what kind of a project you'd like. Can you go to the next slide, Charlie? So if we're working with the state on this, it's worth asking, what are the state's priorities? So on the left, this is a document from the state water boards. All of their potential projects are assigned a priority from A through F. Priority A through C are acute public health issues, for example. By priority D, we're talking about systems that work, but they're unreliable. By priority E and F, we're maybe talking about secondary contaminants. So my water is healthy, but it smells bad or tastes bad or looks funny. Because Mendocino has experienced insufficient water sources, and that's that first highlighted section up at the top, a project here would fall in that top category. And as you can see, they also like consolidation projects. So it's likely this project would involve consolidation of one or more of these many, 28 systems that are around. So this is the kind of project they like to fund. That's good news for you guys. And it means that if the stakeholders can identify a project for your community, then the water board is authorized to provide up to $60,000 per connection for that new system. And that can actually go up to $80,000 per connection with good cause. So it could provide up to $20 million for a project. That's even if you aren't inside the DAC, if you aren't classified as disadvantaged. It could go higher than 20 million if you are. So I would encourage you guys to think about this as an opportunity to bring something positive to your community, because at least for right now, there is support and there is a willingness to do a project here from the state. Thanks.
That's it for us. So now we can take questions, Marianne.
Okay, thank you all for the great presentation. Really appreciate it. What we're going to do now, I want to call people's attention to the QR code. This will give you, and there's also a URL. These will be made available to everybody, so you know where our website is. More information will be coming up. A lot of the comments and presentation points that were made today will make its way onto our website. I'm going to try a little experiment here before we go into an open discussion, since we have a little bit of time, but I'm going to launch a poll. Just the questions in this poll is just to get a sense of who is in our audience and some of the interests that is happening. So let me try to do that, and we'll see if that works. And oops, no. Launch it. Okay. Can you all see this poll now and take an action on that? Holly, can you see it? And Adam? Great.
I can see it.
I can see people are putting in some information. That's great. Gives us a sense of where we're at. So it looks like in terms of our audience, we have between 5 and 12 years of being in this area. There's at least 4 of us over 20 years. Long-time residents. Not as many business owners are here today in attendance. And 9 out of 14 said that they did not have to buy water in the past 10 years. So this just gives us a little sampling of who the audience is and stuff as we're asking these questions. Let's see, a few others are putting information in. Okay, that's great. So hopefully that helps the GHD team understand who's in and attending today's meeting. I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. Now, we did have some set questions that I'd like to launch, but I have noticed that there is, I think, a question in the chat, if I'm not mistaken. And we'll go ahead and start with that question. I'm trying to see, I could see it's from John Allen. What is environmental justice? Is it those who pay for water infrastructure out of their earnings must give to those who have never paid for infrastructure, such as NCCSD? So I don't know if we want to lead with that open-ended question, and I will go ahead and launch the discussion questions that we have, but we could start there.
Say, Mary Ann, if I could interject, when we do get to the questions, I would like to request that folks introduce themselves so that we can have that for the record as well.
And I just want to make sure, let's see, John, hold on. And yeah, I could see, thank you. People are raising their hands, and that helps me, allows me to see who would like to open the floor to either ask a question or share. So I'm gonna open it up for Steve. I think you are able to unmute now.
The same place. Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Steve Gomes here. Actually, my family's been here since 1925, so I know a lot about the area. But the questions I have, there was a source water study of 1993, Lawrence and Associates, 2-year study. Apparently, the water sources for those springs, which were determined to be adequate, are not inside your scope of at least search for a water source. And I'm just wondering, if you don't find an adequate source inside the boundaries of the district, which I don't think you're going to, will that be incorporated in a future study? And the 1985 study the Department of Resources did has some conclusions in the back that the NCCSD hydrologists have not used, I don't think, the correct number, because they're saying there's 210 acre feet there. I think it was on page 48 of that 1985 study that they pumped the town. The recovery rate of the wells, a lot of them were like 5 gallons an hour or less. They couldn't determine it. And that there was only 59 acre feet available amongst the Mendocino Headland Aquifer, which, as much as I could study, does not include east of Highway 1. So that's enough. I'll let you answer those questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so who's gonna ask that? You want me to jump in on that one? That's a great question. First of all, really love it. There are some interesting findings in that, that 1985 DDW, and they do differentiate between the marine terrace, the shallow marine terrace deposits sort of up to the surface, which isn't very thick, doesn't hold a lot of water, and most of it's flowing out constantly in a flux, so it's not really stored. So not much of it is intercepted. So that's sort of, that's a recurring theme and a problem, and I appreciate you kind of touching on that a little bit. Even going up to the other terrace deposits, some that I've worked on and identified and done some work in, and many others. Some of the conceptual model really is that there's quite a bit of groundwater moving through the marine terrace deposits. It's been identified as the best source of groundwater on the Mendocino coast, including the Sonoma coast. Going on up into the Humboldt coast, it's a reoccurring theme. The problem is it's always in flux. And so it's always just discharging off as seeps or into springs and gulches. And so there's that. To your original question of the Lawrence, that 1993 study, there's a few things in there that were identified, and some of them involve really putting in reservoirs and really like dams, and so that's a whole can of worms in itself. That's something that has been looked at over the years in detail. And back then, in the 1993 dollars, the 6 million and sort of range numbers that they're throwing out, and the amount of water they could store now would be an unbelievable bargain, right? And I think the difference, I think what's sort of highlighted here is that the difference is every single study up until this one literally says we recommend this, that, or the other, and it's a bunch of money, but you should do it. Here we are now, and kind of like what Adam touched on is there's some funding mechanisms now potentially for some options that the community would choose to go with. And so that's sort of, I think, the biggest difference here. I think stepping outside the study area is also a great question, and we're touching on that in all these different studies in the source water report that we're putting together, including that one. And I think that that's a really good point, in that there are some other options that were identified, farther up, whether it be miles up in east up different gulches or otherwise, that are still viable. And so that's true.
Thank you, Ryan. Jim, I see you had your hand raised. Did you want to supply an answer or ask a question?
No, more procedural. I think if we're following, and this is a great question, I agree. But we should probably try to follow the agenda. And number 3 on the agenda is public water systems representatives for comment period, and trying to limit them as well as the public to 3 minutes each. But sorry to interrupt, but trying to keep this on, kind of a track. Thank you.
Let me just ask a question procedurally, Jim, to make sure. I was opening it up so that people could raise their hands, and then we call on them accordingly. Is that okay to do that?
I think if we first try to do the public water system representatives first to raise their hands, and then after we exhaust and go through the folks that are wanting to talk from the public water system side, then we open it up to the public for their comments, and again 3 minutes each.
I understand. So I'm going to ask the audience to self-identify, first of all. If you are from a public water system and you do have a question, then now is the time to raise your hand, and we will have you share that information.
Thank you, Marianne.
So I'll pause there first to see if anybody has a question. We do have, of course, some discussion questions that we're going to ask the audience. But before we begin that, let me just follow through with Jim's. And I am not seeing, as you all can see in the chat, I do not see anybody's hand raised at this moment in time. So let me go ahead and pose one of 3 questions that we have for the group. The first one is, what factors do you believe should be prioritized in evaluating and selecting long-term water supply solutions for Mendocino? So we're asking the public and the water systems first to see if they have a response. And I'll say this again. What factors do you believe should be prioritized in evaluating and selecting long-term water supply solutions for Mendocino?
Include the public.
Okay. Steve?
Like Ryan kind of nailed it.
I think Steve is the only hand I see raised at this moment. So go ahead, Steve. I think you're on.
Oh, okay. So briefly, I just want to say that also that the Russian Gulch State Park is going to receive water from this system. And, you know, it only seems to like if we're going to pull water from the state park area in the Big River area at all, that they are supplying their own properties with this also. But one of the things about source, what's most important to me is it's easy to find. And if you have springs, you know, you see water, you have water. And if horizontal well drilling or something could be accomplished and hidden from the public somewhat, that would be very suitable. And you have a haul road that's very easy to bring the water lines without paving and other expensive issues. So just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody from the GH team follow up to that?
I could provide a comment and say I love that kind of discussion. I've been a part of. I can't count how many types of horizontal drilling projects. Generally, they're for very low flow, smaller capacity, and don't and also very dependent on last year's rain. So if we end up with drought conditions, they often are some of the first ones to go dry or be even lower flow. But there are a lot of small communities that have done horizontal drilling wells essentially. They don't, you know, they have to be treated like surface water. So there's going to be issues with that, but it is a source. And I could talk about that type of collection of water. I can go on and on, but I'll leave it there. But I appreciate that comment.
Great. Yes, from the MCCSD.
Yeah, hi, my name is Ishvi with the MCCSD. I have a liking that the source be identified in an area that does not just rely on groundwater, because we do get a fair amount of rain every year. So I think we should do some sort of combination of reservoir filled with groundwater so we can get runoff. Also, I'm wondering if CDFW
for water
conversation by your agencies. They are, in my experience, one of the more difficult state agencies, and they have a lot of weight in terms of what you can and cannot use for source water. So I'd like to see if we could bring them in early in the design phase. And also looking further east up Little Lake Road, outside of the district boundary, offers a lot of advantages because it gets you out of the coastal zone as well. So the construction of a reservoir or any type of facility will become a whole lot easier. And lastly, I think if we can find our source water up on Little Lake, we also get the benefit of gravity feed to our town, which will drastically reduce the amount of energy needed to bring pressure to all the service area. And I believe that there is a lot of water and suitable geological profiles up Little Lake Road in and around 2.5 to 3 miles east of the village. And I think you could do multiple sources all going to a large reservoir in that area. Some from groundwater, some from runoff, some from local wells, and probably some piped up from the Jackson Street area of town, which has a lot of good wells. Thanks.
Thank you. That was great. Appreciate it. Again, any comment? Oh, was there more from MCCSD? Yes, go ahead.
I operate many of the public water systems here. And mostly I find that there isn't a lot of great sources, and that we can run a public water system for 31 houses on less than 2 gallons a minute. And that's mostly what I've seen is single digit well reductions.
And I'm sorry, could you say your name out loud for the recording?
Get it? Donna?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, any response? Otherwise, I'll go on to the next question from the GHD team.
Yeah, I'd like to respond to Ishvi.
Mhm.
We are looking into all, as we're reviewing source possibilities, we're considering, agency requirements in our report. So we are considering, what is CDFW, California Department of Fish and Wildlife? I think I'm saying that right. What are their requirements? We're investigating all the options and looking beyond the study area for potentially citing, future infrastructure. This is a very zoomed out analysis that we're doing. So we're not surveying sites. We're not looking at property acquisition. Can we even buy the property? Is somebody going to sell it to us? Do we need to, how would we get it? How much do we need? What are the environmental implications? We're going to do an analysis from a very high level, if that explains it. And we really appreciate all your ideas, Ishvi, and everyone else.
Thank you. I am opening up the Q&A and I see Dan has a question. And so Dan, I'm gonna open it up for you to share your questions with the group. I think you're on mute, so you should be able to. Dan, are you able to share so we could hear you? Otherwise, I could read your question out loud as it's in the Q&A. Okay, so let me go ahead and read it out loud for everybody to hear. Since this is a focus meeting, let me ask for a little more focus on the earliest part of the study. Adam's comments and Holly's initial project scope of determining how much water do we need and how much water do we need doesn't seem to me to be sufficiently narrow or strategic. As I asked at a previous board public meeting, what is being done about defining the actual qualitative and quantitative problem of the scarcity of water? Who has run out of water? Where are they located? What distinguishes their situation? The type of wells they have, the businesses they run, the amount of water they use. These questions are not intended to cast doubt, but there is a water problem, but rather to define the problem so we can better consider the feasibility of the alternative solutions. So that's the open-ended question. Obviously, it's not to answer all of those, but just to find out if that's being pursued.
Yeah, I can speak to that. So Dan, I think Marianne and I did meet you at the board meeting that we attended, and you did bring this up. And we talked about it in the board meeting, and I think we might have actually spoken about it, not you, but others of us have spoken about it afterwards. Focusing in on and dialing in exactly who runs out of water every year is very difficult because people aren't reporting it. They're not reporting it for obvious reasons. And we can get information related to how much water has been trucked and hauled into Mendocino, but that's not really confirmed information either. I think MCCSD found some information, but it's not confirmed, so we can't really use it. Aside of calling like actual truck haulers and getting them to share that information with us, we're sort of out of ideas on that. And in the source water study itself, that's our obligation. That's our one of our goals is to describe the problem, is to identify the problem into greater detail. And we're doing what we can to do that. And really what the source water study is going to do is, we're estimating the demands using information that we actually have from meter readings that are reported monthly, using information that's reported to the state by the community water systems and the public water systems, and using anecdotal information and industry standard estimates by use. We're also looking at, comparing that to water demands by land use, water demands by population, water demands by zoning. So we're looking at this in several different ways so that we don't miss anything in terms of describing the problem and making sure that we're covering all of our bases. I hope that answers your question. Being able to actually quantify exactly who's running out of water where, maybe Ryan can speak to that, Ryan Crawford. As soon as I'm done, I think we have an idea of where most of these wells are that go dry annually or during drought periods. But I'm not a hydrogeologist, so I'll let him speak on that.
Well, I'd say the district has the initial pass of the bulk of information really to answer that question, and with some of the criteria that they've developed over the decades for the type of water year and uses and allotments. When you only get so much rain, then the depth of water increases, and as everyone there in the community knows better than anyone, a lot of the wells are just very shallow. If you have a 30-foot well and groundwater goes to 25, 30 feet because if it's a bad year, you're not going to have any water. So a lot of it is really the well construction, but then the availability of it in the location you're at. At least down in the headlands I'm talking about. And bedrock doesn't yield a whole lot. You can only squeeze so much out of the Franciscan. And then, excuse me, and then farther up gradient, with the fluvial wells, really the wells near the creeks, those are often also hand dug, 10, 15, 20, 30 feet. Same thing, same problem, depending on the rain year. The rain terrace wells tend to do better, especially if they actually go down to bedrock and they've got 30 or 40 or sometimes there's 50 feet. Saturated thickness in an old marine sand, and those are all discharging to the gulches and seeps that go down and eventually go to the cliffs and everything. But those tend to, if they're not super shallow, then they won't go dry as often. But I think a lot of it is a combination, the type of rain you've got and the well construction that you've got on your well. And so I think there's a lot of confusion that ends up happening, it seems like, over the years for various projects there that I've noticed, and that people don't necessarily equate to a bad rain year and a shallow well as sort of the problem. And someone else is stealing it. Maybe a neighbor's pumping too much is what they will often go to. But anyway, so I'll stop it there.
I think Steve has his hand raised.
Yeah, I was just gonna make a comment, generally in my past histories of how much water we need for this area, for the delivery, and I think the people need to know just something basic like, I would think it'd be 300 to 400 gallons per minute for source water, although you can tank it, maybe we use a little less than that, but that's the kind of water you're looking for. A lot of people in town think these wells in town have anywhere near that kind of volume. And so far we know of none of those, and I don't think you're gonna find any. The other comment was on developing those springs. I mean, if you just develop a spring, I was just talking about horizontal drilling, if that would expand the development of the spring itself. So if anything, that might be a little different than most areas because those are available. So if that's anywhere close to the volume, if you can make a statement of that. Oh, the other thing is they did spend $750,000 trucking water to Mendocino, so that might be evidence to how much trucked water was actually needed. Maybe that's a verifiable number you can use. Okay, thank you.
Some of that we're touching on many of those points you said, Steve, and I really appreciate that. And I think we're getting back to storing it. A spring is not going to give you the flow you're going to need at any given moment. A collection of a whole bunch of them, maybe, but then it'll get to low flow during a drought once again. And so we're stuck with the same recurring theme. We need to be able to store it and balance it off at various locations. And as the district just earlier commented on, I mean, ideally up gradient so you can use gravity and you can store it out of the way, out of people's viewscapes, and get it down to the people that need it when they need it and on demand. And so you can balance that out with some in storage and some, as it's flowing out, whether it be from collections of different wells, different springs, and different sources. And I think that's what it's gonna have to be part of the approach, is a combination. I think it's a really good point.
Great. MCCSB, I think there was a question.
Board member issue again. I think that that's going to be the way to go, and I want to think about storage. I'd like to encourage you guys to look at reservoirs rather than tank storage. I think we can get a whole lot more gallons for a lot less money, and have it be more reliable. I know Fort Bragg just put in a fairly large reservoir up at their place on Summers Lane, and it would give us that ability to use multiple sources to fill and get the added benefit of rainwater catchment and surface water during the winter to fill whatever, you know, millions of gallons of water you guys calculate the size of the reservoir needs to be. There's a number of gulches up on Little Lake Road that could be fairly easily dammed, where you have basically 3 sides already constructed and you're just having to put in an earthen dam. I think that would be the most cost-effective method to develop a large reservoir.
Right. Yeah. Any other follow-up comments from GHD on that?
I know Holly and I,
Mhm.
sorry, was someone going to talk? I was going to say, I think there's plenty that we can identify right out the gate, you know, right now, and we have in the past that would be, and that are non-salmonid bearing and the least impact. So that'd be a whole series of studies that need to be done. But I think the community in general has voiced that if you're taking from flows that go to certain species and ecosystems, you know, that needs to be identified, you know, right out the gate as something that people wouldn't have the stomach for. But I think there's a lot of those that just go right out and just go right off on the cliffs. There aren't wetlands, there aren't fish going up. And there's just some pretty low hanging fruit there to identify, I mean, right now. And we've a lot of the community has pondered this probably for decades, and it'd probably be good to circle back on some of those and see what people think about that.
Great. So I'm going to introduce this next question, which I think many of you have already shared your thoughts, but it's really good in this situation to make sure that we're capturing everything. And so feel free to either raise your hand and speak, or even put this answers or ideas you have in the chat. But the question is, how have water restrictions or shortages impacted your daily life, business operations, or activities? So any of the specificity around that, I think, would really help those developing the study to make sure it's included.
Could you repeat that again, Marianne?
Sure, no problem. The question is, how have water restrictions or shortages impacted your daily life, business operations, or activities? Okay. I think Steve has a comment. And Steve, I think you're able to go ahead and speak.
Okay, thank you. Well, I mean, one of the things about water source here, of course, we've been limited by allotments and other issues. And each parcel of land, you know, for like cultivation uses and others have not been considered. So what we're really looking for, and we're going to use more water than you're seeing on these meter readings, is, you know, beneficial use. So people want to have a reasonable beneficial use, and that's what the state talks about in our private property water rights. So what we're doing is, am I still on?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So you know, so that's what we're pursuing here, is to, you know, have a reasonable use. And I don't think most people don't do that. You see a lot of dry area in town, and I remember when there was a lot more greenery and flowers growing around the neighborhoods, and I think we'd like to see that too. So, thank you.
Great. Anyone else? GHD, any specific questions or follow-up to this question? Hard for me to see everybody when I have the questions up, so that's why I didn't put it up.
Oh, I see. That's what you did there.
It's just a really important question, though, as many people who can chime in about how it has impacted their lives and their businesses. I just think that is exceedingly important to hear everyone's.
And like I want to encourage folks to, you know, go ahead and type it into the chat if you have, because that'll be also recorded and held on to. So if that's easier for you than speaking out, please do.
I can speak to that as a longtime contractor in this town. I've seen many projects that people had proposed, ideas that they wanted to do, granny units they wanted to build, cafes they wanted to have happen. Many projects that were unable to go to fruition because of the groundwater management scheme that was set up here for the town. And I think that a community water system would alleviate a lot of that, and we would have a more vibrant town that allowed for more economic activity, as well as potentially more housing, not to mention a much more quality water. We have a lot of poor quality water in the town as well. So I think that it certainly has impacted the business community a lot, particularly the businesses that are having to purchase water. And so I think it may just make sense for this town that we would have a more vibrant town if we had a water system.
Thank you. Jason, I've unmuted you if you want to introduce yourself and.
Yeah, this is Jason Morse. I'm the superintendent at Mendocino Unified School District. The water restrictions and shortages have impacted the amount of water we can put on our athletic fields. So, you know, we haven't received recycled water for quite some time. So we've been watering as much as we can with our tanks up on Little Lake Road. And if we can't water as much as we'd like to, the fields turn not only brown, but rock hard. And it's very unsafe for our athletes to be playing soccer down there. So we're trying to keep our fields as green as possible and as lush as possible and as safe as possible. So that's our biggest impact as far as restrictions and shortages go here at the district.
Great, thank you. And I see, let's see, David Better also has his hand raised. You would introduce yourself.
Sure, thanks, Marianne. And this is David Better. I am part of the ownership group who about 20 months ago bought the Mendocino Hotel and Hill House, who I'm sure most of the folks on this call know. First and foremost, we are very excited to be bringing those properties kind of back to life as, you know, centers of gravity and gathering places for residents and visitors alike. And, you know, there will be a lot of work to come over the next 12 months, you know, spent on those properties to kind of bring them back to life. But I just wanted to, you know, I think say as a relative outsider here, I'm not a lifelong, you know, Mendocino native, but I just, we you know, we stumbled into this amazing little town with its very special and unique way of life. And certainly I understand the challenges and implications and concerns that are probably nuanced and are held on an individual basis by many, depending on their situations. But when I think about this, kind of to Ishvi's point, I just hope, and, you know, I think about this water system as a way to protect the future of this special place. And I think, you know, we saw what happened in 21 and things are better now, but as sort of a relative newcomer to this town who is kind of hoping to bring back some businesses that everyone can be proud of, that I think this will be a great way, if we can pull it off, to you make sure that there's a sustainable future for such an amazing place.
Thank you, David. Very welcome. GHG, any other follow-up comments? Is there anyone else, as far as attendees, who would like to share any additional information? Okay, so I'm going to move to the last question we have. Let's see. Okay, I think it's this one. Am I correct, Holly? I think this is the third question. In your opinion, what are the most critical actions that should be taken to ensure a reliable and sustainable water supply for Mendocino in the future? Now, some of this has probably already been talked about and addressed, but given that this is our closing question for the session, we can leave it open, of course, for a little while longer to have general conversation. I think it would be good to kind of either reiterate or on other opportunities for our attendees to to respond to some of these questions that would help the water study. Anyone? And Jason and David, oh, Steve, I see you just raised your hand. If you have finished your questions, just lower your hand so this way I can know who's new to this one. So I think Steve is the one who raised his hand for this.
That's Steve, I'm back again. Okay, so I think that one of the critical actions, I think the most critical action for acceptance of all this is we need to have a greater area of funding. The funding of this, everybody looks at it and said, oh, it's just too much money. And that's what happened in the 90s and else before this. So, I mean, since Mendocino is the tourist capital of this county, I mean, the damage that's been done to our tourist industry, possibly just because, you know, there was, portable potties and stuff on TV, and Mendocino was out of water, and that's probably stuck in some people's minds. But you know, Mendocino attracts the revenue all the way on Highway 28, all the way into Sonoma County. Boonville benefits from this, and Mendocino, and on the side, Fort Bragg greatly benefits from this. So I think that we have to say that those 3,000 people per month or whatever that come as tourists are actually residents of this area, and that we have to supply the water and the safety and the sanitation for them also. And so it goes beyond us few that live here. And I think we entertain the world, and I think we need to really look out for that and protect that. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Jason, did you have a follow-up question on this or a follow-up response on this question? I see your hand is raised.
Oh, sorry, I forgot to lower it.
It's okay. Anyone else? Any other thoughts? MCCSD, go ahead.
This is Donna Finer. I just want, in the planning of this, right now we have all these small systems and it's much easier to find leaks. So I hope when the new system is developed that there is a method to track down where water is leaking so we don't have to need as much water to be supplied.
Great. Thank you, Donna.
I can say something too.
Yep.
This is Jim Sullivan. I just wanted to add that one of the things that I wanted to kind of make sure that is considered and kind of a critical thing is that the actions that if we do take something today, that we kind of keep our eye on down the road as well, so that some of the actions that we might do, could contribute to whatever maybe that bigger picture might be, so that we don't have to come back and redo what we've already done. Like consolidations and how that makes sense, and kind of that long-term planning.
Yeah, and this is Ishvi weighing in one last time with an idea that I'd like you guys to take into account as you do the engineering studies for all this, which is because we don't know exactly how we're going to pay for this and whether there's going to be a share paid locally, a share from SAFER, and a combination of fundings. To do the design criteria with the simplest approach possible, what gives us our most bang for the buck? What would we, we're a historical town. So what would people have done in the 40s or 50s? Granted, we have more jurisdictional obstacles and we're not going to dam up the river. But what can we still do that is not a high-tech solution? Because the fundamentals of water engineering really haven't changed since Roman times, So if we can get this water up above our heads, catch it as much as we can, and feed it to the town, I think, and keep it pretty simple, we're going to have a lot better chance of paying for it. So I'd like to kind of keep that foremost in our mind at the design phase, so that we don't put something out to bid that's way beyond what we had the ability to pay.
Thank you. Let's see, is there anyone else I'm looking to shout out? Anybody raise their hands? I would just like to say, and I realize that I am only the facilitator here, but I do live in the village of Mendocino. And I wanted to comment on the funding. I think it goes beyond the need for tourism. I think it is an economic need for rural communities to have the water they need to survive. And rural communities, given the work that I do for business development, often are underserved and underrepresented in the greater economic scheme of California, probably in other states, but I only know California. And so I think that is something to keep in mind, is that rural communities like ours need to have the basic structures of water and access to water supply. So I just wanted to share that as my comment. MCC SD, is there anything else that you would like to share? And I do not have the agenda up, so Holly or Jim, if you would like to either close us out or add any additional comments from.
We have one more question to answer in the chat from John Allen.
Okay. Can you read it out, Holly? I don't think I'm seeing it in my.
Yeah. What is environmental justice? Is it those who pay for water infrastructure out of their earnings must give to those who have never paid for their infrastructure, such as MCCSD?
You want me to chime in here?
Yes.
Hi, John. I think that's a good question. Environmental justice is a term that gets thrown around a lot and seems to mean something different each time. So I absolutely feel you when you mentioned that. The reason I'm fielding this because I'm the one who brought it into the presentation. The reason I mentioned it was because this is part of the state's stated goals. And so we really need to go to what's their definition for this. The state sees environmental justice as a recognition that when something comes along that impacts drinking water or another similar resource, those impacts don't necessarily fall evenly. So whether it's a drought or a wildfire or what have you, some people get hit harder. And the state wants to be a remedy for that disproportionate falling of consequences. And so they want safer funds to prioritize those who are hit the hardest. And so that's when we say environmental justice in the state's paradigm, that's what we're talking about here. And I think that dovetails with what was being said earlier about about small towns often kind of getting left out of the solutions and stuff like that. And I think they're trying to make an active effort to remedy that and look for those who get hit hard and don't have other options.
Let's see, John, you've raised your hand. I'm gonna make sure that you're able to. Hold on a second. And let's see where is here it is. Okay, go ahead, John. You should be able to.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
So I guess they go back to the environmental justice, environmental. We're going to throw anything we out there we can. Climate change, ground shifts, right? So we talk about small communities, rural communities. I represent 19 homes on a hookup, which puts you over the 15. So we're a small community, right? So we invested in infrastructure, correct? We got water to our community, but the town has not done that. They're relying on these shallow wells and ground shifts and change, droughts come and go. So if we just throw it out there as community, why hasn't the community of Mendocino, the town? So is it environmental justice, or is this we kicked the can down the road so long now it's caught up to us, right? And then going back to Holly, talking to Holly earlier this year was, well, we don't think that the community water district's going to consolidate. So why are we doing the study? We should be looking farther east up the road. Then you start putting this thing back together, $60,000 a hookup. I mean, we have $485,000 in environmental study here. I don't know where those numbers come from. When I started breaking down all the costs, I started scratching my head. There's not even a tractor going in the ground or a drill rig going in the ground to start taking samples, but we're paying $500,000 for the study. I thought that was kind of well, it's a grant. Well, it's tax dollars, right? It's our tax dollars. We have to be steward of our own monies out there. Then I talked to Mendocino Community Service District, and they only have the money to keep the sewer system going. So we're going to put all our marbles back into that one pot, and where I think the viability is going east, going out there and finding a water source for the township and bringing that in, having the township start being responsible for their needs. So similar to these other communities, Surfwood, they serve a small community of 100 and something hookups. We paid hundreds of thousands of dollars for our hookups for our community. And I kind of scratched my head on this thing, but we've fabricated a $500,000 endeavor here that, talking to Hollywood, probably never pan out anyway. So why the study should be farther east, capture that water. Then also, my concern too is you go back to Carmel. Well, environmentally or economically, it makes sense. You can't put another water spigot in Carmel, right? And they've got a community water system as well. I'm scratching my head here saying, is this study really the study that we need to be looking at right now? I think the first question was, is everybody willing to consolidate? If not, then the study is not really meaningful, right? So we're spending $500,000. And we didn't tackle, Steve Gomes had a couple good questions, but we didn't tackle our questions. I mean, the kind of the reality of the study is, where should we start this study, right? Nobody really on this call was out of water. I've never been out. I was in a home with a low or a shallow well. It was the old Lemos home before I had the home I'm in now. So I kind of go back to this is, I think we're maybe going at this the wrong way, right? Did we put the cart before the horse on this study before we spend this $500,000? That's all I have to say. That's a lot. I know. Unpacking.
No, I'll chime in there. I think there was a discussion really early on in this project, and it was about, there's a question of who'd want to be involved, who'd be willing to be involved. There was sort of this, what rates would people pay? And then separately, how much water is there and how much water is needed? And, to come up with a great solution for something like, for a community like this, you really need to get all those ducks in a row. And where do you start? And, I think there were discussions early on about this. I hear your point about taking the temperature of the individual people, first, and maybe that's the better way to start. I'm not here to say it is or isn't. You maybe, you know your community better than I do, but ultimately it was the state made the call on that, in terms of the order of operations for what we were doing here. And yeah, we may all get to the end of this and look back as Monday quarterbacks and find that you're exactly right.
Steve, did you have a response? I think you're free to speak.
I'll try to be quick here. One of the things I know that Safer and the state of California and where Mr. Allen is, I think it's called a mutual water company. In fact, those people own stock in the mutual company. And I think that's probably all of those mutual water companies serving those 3 subdivisions that I know about. But anyway, it's not about whether or not they want to be. Merger is required by Safer in order to do this. So they have the authority to merge those systems. So it's good and bad. I'm sure they don't want to have any more money spent because they already have a water system, but as far as I know, I think we should get that discussion out on the floor so everybody knows.
No, I know.
Ryan, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I was just, just to really clarify, you're not spending this money. And where's the mechanism to even get to the point to the previous caller? Maybe it was John, I'm not sure. I really appreciated all those points. But to get a community together, come up with, okay, which direction do we go? How do we summarize everything that's already been done? I don't see you doing that or paying for it. I don't see it happening in the past. I mean, it's been piecemealed, but this is really the only mechanism you get where someone pays for it in a different mechanism that's not coming out of all your pockets right now. So I think that's a little bit of clarification from how it was spun just now. Otherwise, I don't see someone putting it together. I don't see the community there putting it out of their pockets right now to put a summary together of what's already been done and what the options are. And the state has their own way. So the state isn't always, everything isn't perfect. Nothing's perfect. But it is a mechanism that is funded from a pool that the state put together that they figured they really wanted to prioritize areas that needed help. And this is a way to at least have a starting point. You can't get a shovel in the ground and you can't get a drill rig in the ground in a planning level study, which was really needed. So I'm going to passionately say that I believe in that. The findings are going to be difficult. The past has already had lots of amazing recommendations and studies. We need to get it all in one place so that at least a part of the funding mechanism can look at it and get recommendations from the community and from some scientists, and then come together to see what the path forward is. So.
And the funding wouldn't be released unless those planning studies are done. Right. So Steve, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I was just, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think that what's the misconception here is you have to do all these studies you're doing just to get funding for the future. I mean, so do a great job and find out how we got to get this done so that we can get funding. And then, I mentioned one time there's maybe some federal funding sitting out there after the state funding is available. So we're all for what you're doing. And I think it's money well spent. And it is grant money, by the way. So let's use it properly. I appreciate it. Thank you.
I'd like to speak to what Steve had said earlier related to having to merger water systems in order for there to be a project. I don't know, Adam, if you could speak to that.
I will first mention that you are correct. Senate Bill 88 gives the Division of Drinking Water the right to force a consolidation between water systems if they choose to and if there's cause to. A bunch of things need to be true for that to happen. And I'll say that there's something like 7,500 water systems in the state of California, and the state has, over all the history of this, issued 9 mandatory consolidation orders. 2 of those have actually happened. So that right exists, yes, but I never worry about it. I think it sometimes shows up as a bit of a boogeyman. Those 2 cases where it's actually happened were both, I think, situations where a water system was delivering arsenic-laden water to customers. So it was a bit of a serious situation than I think we're facing here. And I will also mention that one of the projects we're working on, there's a little community out in Owens Valley. It's basically a small community of homes. There's 3 water systems. They're all in a row, north to south, north, middle, and south. The south one's in trouble. They ask, can we consolidate all of you? Or the middle one said no. And so the state is moving forward with plans to run a pipeline around the middle one to connect the top one and the bottom one. So that no, you know, from one of the systems that didn't want to be involved, that got taken seriously. That they acknowledged that and they worked around it and they come up with a new design. So if you're a water system, you say, I don't want to be part of this, I don't think that's necessarily a non-starter, especially if you're healthy, you know, delivering water in compliance with everything. I wouldn't say it's a foregone conclusion.
We have lots of examples of that, Adam, right now, right here on the coast, from Sonoma Coast on up, where that's the first question. Are they interested in consolidating? And it's come up on almost every project. There's several that say no. So then they're just immediately a no. And then they move on to who wants to be a part of this, and they move on. That's what every example so far has been. I think you're right. When it comes to extremely contaminated water and threatening really the health and safety of individuals to that level, those are the sort of the poster child examples of a forced consolidation. So I think those are really good points. Thanks,
So in the interest of time, we are at 1:30. I see that MCCSD has a question or a statement, and then we will close out just to try to end as close to our intended time. So go ahead.
Thank you. This is Ishvi again. I'd just like to recommend to John that maybe this is actually going to be better for your water system. That consolidation might end up serving all of these mutual water systems in a more cost-effective way over time, because they're not free to maintain either, and you have the benefits of those systems, but they're also aging. And I really think that we can create a water system similar to what they're doing in Fort Bragg. They have really, you know, they're experiencing the same droughts as us, but they're been able to put in a lot of infrastructure and isolate themselves substantially from those vagaries of, you know, climate change and heating plants, drier times or whatever. And I think that these mutual water systems actually could see this as a benefit. So I think we're really on the right track, and I'm thankful that the state here has ponied up $500,000, which in today's dollars doesn't actually buy you very much, to bring all these experts here and help us figure this out, because this is definitely something that is very, very timely. That more timely, I'm very optimistic, because I feel like it's a lot more timely than maybe it was in 85 or 1990. We're just all pressed a lot more, and everybody realizes now sort of the limits that we're under. So I think it's really timely. I think we have an opportunity to get this done. And so I'd like to see, you know, if there's a discussion we can have with you, John, and the other people in the mutual water systems, where MCCSD, we can work closely with, you know, you guys, so that your concerns are addressed, because we are all just one small community here.
Well, that's that. Can you guys hear me? This is John. That's the the point I was getting to is, you know, the study could have been a little bit more pinpoint, going back with Steve. Steve and I've talked in the past as well. Especially there's opportunities and there's detriments out there on every project. Consolidation. We had some repairs we did this last year as well. That was quite costly. Thank you, Donna, for helping us there. But at the end of the day is that to have a study that is more resilient and more focused is bringing those players, especially the large players, in a room to begin with, and say, okay, here's pros and cons. And I think that's a big pro out there would be, hey, consolidation could save your residents money and improve your infrastructure. Where the cons are about that, if it's mismanaged and if it's not kept up to date, could cost you more in the long run. All right. So there is some cons out there, and we can address the boogeyman in the room when it comes to that, and then focus the study on a little bit more pinpoint. Use that $500,000 to not only figure out where that water is, which direction it's heading, where we can capture it, upstream, downstream, but also, you know, bring those players along and have a more focused results. You know, as Steve talked about a little bit there, I'm all about the community and supporting the community and doing the right thing. But the main thing is I felt that there wasn't an engagement. We're going out there looking at consolidating water possibly as one of the remedies, or maybe one of 3 remedies, but we never really talked to the players out there ahead of time. And then we could have focused this study on, hey, they're all interested in consolidation. So let's focus on consolidation and see if we can handle it, right? That's all I just say, when you approach these in the future, maybe kind of go at it a little bit different direction from the beginning and go after the stakeholders first. That's all I got.
We have one more question, but before I unmute, I just wanted to make sure that it was okay to go over MCC. Is that fine? All right. So M. Rowan, and I don't know the full name. So please introduce yourself.
Hi, Monty Rowan, California State Parks.
Thank you.
If you guys are considering consolidation, how far out would you go on the original map you showed us? Just the inner purple or the city area, or would you be heading out towards Russian Gulch? Maybe including the Ford House, things like that?
We haven't determined in terms of consolidation what different arrangements we'll be looking at. We haven't gotten into the alternatives analysis that deep yet to have those conversations. This kind of goes in line with what John just said. That was one of the very first things that I did, was get contact information to the larger community water system so I could introduce myself, introduce this project, and talk about what we're trying to do here, and use the information that we glean from any site visits to inform our source water study and the alternatives analysis. So to answer your question, Monty, we're not there yet to determine that. I doubt we will go that far north, but we really don't know. Everything is on the table right now.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Jim, do you want to close out?
Yeah, and Mary Ann and the GHT gang, I sure appreciate the information shared, and I think the community is much more informed as far as what we're trying to do here with this feasibility study, and I appreciate everybody's time. And with that, I will call the meeting to an end.
Just as a reminder, September 4th at 6 p.m., we are going to have an additional one.
Excuse me, I guess I forgot one last point. I needed to ask for any public comment for non-agendized items before I call in the meeting. So is there any items or any folks that would like to provide?
Canceling the water metering system and closing out the court date, Jim? Now that you don't have water?
I don't want to throw that worm into the pile.
Excuse me?
I think that was just that. If you would raise your hand, if anybody has a non-agendized item. Okay, Steve.
Steve?
Okay.
Go ahead, Steve.
Be unmuted.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah, hi, you guys. I'm Tom Arden at the end of Blair Street. So now that we've officially determined, other than all the private water companies, that there's essentially no water in Mendocino, are we done with this water metering thing or whatever club or whatever it is? We're gonna move forward, you guys?
Yeah, that will still continue on until the community has a water system in place.
Why?
That's part of our ordinance.
But what does it do? Well, I'm saying, what is it doing since it's not been proven effective? And there's no water. What are you metering?
Sorry, Steve. It's not.
Tom.
Oh, Tom.
Non-agenda.
He's at my house, so.
You asked non-agenda, so are we done?
For public comment. So we.
Public,
Yeah, okay.
okay, I'm through.
I like to mention one thing, you do have a new lawyer, a new legal advice. And I was on this board, I would request that you review what you're doing with this allotment system that you have, and if it's actually something that you can continue in the future. So please take note of that. And That's your job. Any comment? Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Any other comments from the public? Seeing none, I will now adjourn the meeting officially. Thank you very much for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, GHD team.